You assume that what you see is real. The world appears before you, defined by shape, distance, and clarity. Yet Ibn Arabi asked whether perception truly reveals what exists, or whether it merely repeats what the mind expects to find. He suggested that every act of seeing is filtered by memory and belief. What appears as the outer world may be nothing more than an inner construction, projected outward. You begin to wonder, if perception is shaped by what you already know, then what remains unseen? Ibn Arabi called these the hidden worlds, realities that are not far away, but unnoticed. They exist within the same field of awareness, concealed only by the limits of recognition. When you look, do you encounter the world or your interpretation of it? Ibn Arabi, born in 12th century Andalusia, lived at the meeting point of philosophy, theology, and mystical inquiry. His writings, the Meccan Revelations and the Bezels of Wisdom, sought to understand how consciousness perceives divine reality. In a time when scholars separated intellect from experience, he insisted that true knowledge arises through direct awareness. For him, philosophy was not a system but an unveiling, an exploration of how knowing itself unfolds. His approach was both rational and experiential, a discipline of thought that turns inward until the boundary between thinker and thought dissolves. You believe that seeing is simple, the eyes open, and the world appears. But every act of perception is guided by what the mind is prepared to notice. Habit interprets before awareness arrives. Ibn Arabi explained that genuine seeing begins when these filters are suspended. Then perception no longer selects. It receives. In that receptive state, diversity no longer hides unity. It expresses it. When perception ceases to judge, the world ceases to fragment. The act of seeing becomes a reflection of reality, recognizing itself through you. Could it be that vision is not a human capacity, but a universal awareness momentarily focused through the human form? For Ibn Arabi, the hidden worlds are not places or dimensions. They are levels of meaning within every experience. Each phenomenon has two sides, its outer form and its inner significance. Ordinary perception grasps the form. Awakened perception recognizes the meaning. What remains unseen is not absent. It is the depth ignored when attention remains on appearance. Not to perceive these hidden worlds is not to travel elsewhere, but to become subtle in awareness. The same event, the same word, the same encounter, each holds an invisible logic waiting to be realized. If what is hidden lies within what is visible, what keeps it concealed? Habit forms a consistent world, but consistency often replaces truth with repetition. You tend to see what you expect. Expectation becomes a quiet law shaping perception. Ibn Arabi observed that the mind repeats the familiar and calls it knowledge. Renewal requires deliberate unknowing, the willingness to question every certainty. When thought relaxes its grasp, perception renews itself. The known becomes fluid again. Yet this renewal demands risk, the loss of fixed meaning. Ibn Arabi implied that knowledge without renewal becomes blindness disguised as clarity. If true understanding depends on letting go of certainty, can knowledge ever claim completion? Ibn Arabi's method was not a ritual or formula. It was a discipline of awareness. He proposed that thought must turn upon itself, observing the movement by which it defines reality. Each assumption must be traced to its source. In this self-observation, one discovers that perception is an act of construction. The world is organized according to the framework of the observer. When awareness observes this process without interference, The framework loosens. The observer and the observed begin to merge. This is unveiling, not the gaining of new visions, but the ending of separation. To investigate without creating another veil requires attention free from motive. Can inquiry continue when the inquirer no longer stands apart from what is known? Ibn Arabi wrote that ignorance is not the lack of knowledge, but the fixation on partial understanding. Every concept clarifies one aspect while concealing another. The intellect, proud of its precision, forgets that precision is limitation. To know rightly is to know provisionally, to allow understanding to breathe. He distinguished between possession of knowledge and participation in truth. The first isolates, the second unites. When knowledge becomes property, it blinds. When it becomes participation, it liberates. Real intelligence, therefore, lies in humility, the awareness that the knower and the known are not two separate things. Can you know something without turning it into something owned? From this humility arises Ibn Arabi's central insight, the unity of being, wadat al-wujud. There is only one reality appearing as countless forms. Perceiver and perceived are expressions of the same essence. The visible and the hidden, the self and the world, are complementary aspects of a single being. To see this unity is not to erase difference, but to understand it as articulation. Diversity becomes the language through which oneness communicates. Every form, every event, every mind, each declares the same truth in its own syntax. When perception divides, illusion begins. When it unites, recognition occurs. What remains when division is no longer needed? Awareness seems to stand apart, observing what happens. Yet Ibn Arabi taught that awareness is not separate from what it knows. It is the very field in which everything appears. When you observe a thought, it is awareness observing its own modulation. There is no distance between seer and seen. This recognition reverses the ordinary direction of perception. The world is not before you. You are within the same intelligence that appears as the world. Every perception is reality knowing itself in a specific way. If there is only one act of knowing, what becomes of the personal I that claims ownership of experience? Ibn Arabi described the individual self as a temporary form through which universal consciousness speaks. The self functions as a center of interpretation, translating the infinite into the limited. When this is understood, the effort to achieve special vision ends. Seeing continues, but without a seer who claims it. In this condition, knowledge is no longer possession but participation. The hidden worlds are not unveiled. They were never veiled. Reality remains undivided, self-aware, whole. The personal self dissolves into the function of awareness itself. If the one who sees disappears, does seeing cease, or does it finally reveal what has always been seeing? The vision that reveals hidden worlds is not extraordinary. It is the natural clarity of awareness when interpretation ends. Ibn Arabi's method does not promise new experiences. It returns perception to its source. The hidden becomes visible when the observer stops dividing reality into inner and outer, known and unknown. What was pursued as a secret is recognized as the obvious. The real has never been absent. Revelation is not an event in time, but the ending of confusion. When the mind no longer adds, reality discloses itself through simplicity. Thought rests, not in conclusion, but in understanding. The world remains as it is, transparent to the awareness that perceives no boundary within it. The journey begins with the assumption that perception reveals. the world and ends with the insight that perception itself is the world expressing awareness. Through Ibn Arabi's reasoning, certainty gives way to humility, separation to unity. His secret method is not mystical escape, but disciplined clarity, the continuous unveiling of thought's own construction. The listener travels from interpretation toward recognition, from effort toward understanding. Nothing new is gained. What was hidden is simply no longer overlooked. The final stillness is not silence, but comprehension without division. The quiet knowledge that the seer and the seen were never two.